I'm Major Scott Husing, and I am pleased to introduce my dear friend and fellow author, Dr. Shauna Springer, who wrote Warrior, to this chapter of the Marine Memorial Club's Meet the Author series. As a former guest of the Meet the Author series in person in San Francisco, I know what a complete honor it is to be part of this very elite club that's been invited in to share their stories with you. Doc Springer's work in Warrior has been lauded by people like Sebastian Younger and so many others within our community of helping veterans that truly understands what some veterans are dealing with post-traumatic stress and the mental issues and the family issues, and she totally gets it. I think I wrote recently that she had the ability to stick her hand down into those dark spots where some veterans are struggling with post-traumatic stress and reach in and pull them out into the sunshine. That's how impactful her work has been in Warrior. I can't say enough good things about her professionalism. Her book has been instrumental and will last for years and years and years to come on professional reading lists, and for families of veterans and for our Warrior tribe that really want to understand and heal. I think that's probably the most important part about what she's done. And as a Marine for over 24 years, we use the term doc, and we don't use it lightly. And to call Shauna Doc Springer is one that we say with great love and affection, because for me, her work has been instrumental in really changing so many lives. And I was completely honored to read the foreword to her book by our good friend Sergeant Eddie Wright up in Seattle, and all the amazing contributions she continues to give and connect our veteran community. I cannot say enough great things, but it is absolutely my pleasure to introduce Dr. Shauna Springer and her book Warrior on this chapter of Meet the Author.
Okay, well, we are just so excited to be here today with Doc Shauna Springer. And as part of the Marines Memorial's tradition of honoring the legacy of military service and sharing timeless leadership lessons learned in all walks of life, the conversation continues in this online extension of what normally takes place at our club during this particularly unique time during COVID-19. The Marines Memorial is a nonprofit hotel, theater, restaurant, and event space in downtown San Francisco. And we've been serving generations past and generations to come for 75 years and counting. It's been there for a long time. And we're really proud to serve this unique town. Please visit marinesmemorial.org to learn more about our mission and how you can become a member. I am Susannah Stokes. I'm a Marines Memorial board member and a Marine veteran. And this is our first virtual Meet the Author discussion. So please note that the personal opinions expressed here are those of the speakers and not necessarily those of the Marines Memorial. Welcome, Doc Springer. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Susannah. It's good to be here.
Awesome. So you recently wrote a book called Warrior, How to Support Those Who Protect Us. And I have it right here because I have been just eating it up, and I am so thrilled to be talking with you today about your book. We really appreciate the work that you have done already and the work that you continue to do to support our veterans.
Thank you. Well, really, this has been a partnership with so many who've taken the oath of service over the past decade plus that I've been walking with them. You wouldn't want me in a physical firefight, but I've walked through a lot of valleys of mental warfare with people, and this was a book that was really close to my heart, and a partnership really with so many of our nation's warfighters.
It really is a powerful book, and like I said, we're so excited to be talking about it today. But first, I'd really love to know, what is it that brought you into service for our veterans, and you as a therapist, and tell us a little bit about your background and what brought you to this point today.
Okay, sure. It's hard to answer that without really going quite a ways back to my early childhood when my father read The Great Santini and thought that would be a great way to raise kids. And so he and my mom would get us up at 5 a.m. several times a week to run laps around the track in the dark. We were 5, 6 years old, like little kids, and little kids with these, little muscles. And we'd get out there for the track meet every year. And they even had us wearing shirts that said, property of my maiden name. And so, that ethos of, discipline and also commitment to service was a very strong part of my upbringing. My parents kind of took the idea of free range parenting and really took it to an extreme, I think, and started sending us when we were 10 years old, 11, down to South America mostly, to do work with families that we had not met. So they would send us down and say, here's the photo, and this is a trustworthy family, and you're going to go down there and serve with them. And so I had many trips and continued to do that. So as a result of all of these experiences, it really made the ethos of service very close to my heart. And when I started working with warriors, it just felt like a natural, it just felt like home to me. It just felt like a natural fit. So I've never served in the military and wouldn't want to represent that I have. But this has become a tribe that has adopted me, which has become such an honor in my life, and an unexpected honor. I didn't have it all planned out or intend to go into psychology or serve warfighters. It just kind of evolved as I followed what felt right for me.
Wow, what a powerful upbringing and a unique culture that your parents created in your life of kind of developing that spirit of service. And I can absolutely see how that could lead over to you feeling like a part of the tribe. And I would argue that you are serving, you have served, and you continue to serve, considering that you work so closely with our military and our veterans. Yeah, and we've talked a little bit in the past about how you have developed the difference between doctor and doc, and you talk a lot about this in your book. So tell us what that means to you and how that has developed in your career.
Sure. So I think we learn a lot at the intersection of very different cultures. And I've had experiences at the extremes, throughout my life. There were summers I spent under mosquito nets, up in Peru, in the high part of Peru, with kids who had polio. There are weeks that I spent, on the Amazon River, where we actually went out in boats and hunted alligators. But I've also spent some interesting summers. I worked one summer at the Vatican. And so I've had these very extreme experiences. And that's been true for the people I've served as well. I was in private practice with a very well-educated group of people, very successful sort of corporate leaders, before I started working with our nation's warfighters. And the difference wasn't one of intelligence or capacity by any means. It was in how much they wanted to see me. So the first group really values therapy and is willing to pay a lot of money, frankly, to come in and have time to reflect. And when I came in and started working with warfighters, they were looking for any reason to never see me again. And so really understanding there's a very striking cultural gap here, and how I'm perceived, how my role is perceived, from the wizard in perhaps active duty to being somebody that's a healer. I had to think really intentionally about how I build the trust and how I hold the trust. And so this led to a 10-year process of really thinking about what is the difference between a Dr. Springer, that I was, in school for a very long time, was taught all these things, was given to understand that I have expertise to share, and what is a doc? Because that's a very different thing. And what does it mean to enter into a relationship that somehow is outside the confines of rank or positional authority, and you just walk with somebody and you walk with them in a healing partnership? That's what I have found is most effective in serving and supporting warfighters. And I really want to find the other docs out there and help people come alongside warfighters and bring them home.
I like that concept of, bringing them home and walking with them in a healing partnership. I think that's a whole new take on this mutual relationship between the doc and, the healer and the person being healed. And you talk some about mutual respect. So in your book, you say creating a relationship of deep trust and mutual respect is critical if we are to truly understand the nature of how our strongest and bravest citizens may struggle. So I'd love for you to talk more and share with our viewers, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, well, I want to acknowledge, first of all, that, the concept of a doc is one of the greatest honors. When somebody says Doc Springer, that means everything to me. But it is also based on the example of corpsmen, trusted corpsmen, who are people that warriors would trust with their lives, or trust to, do the best job they can to fix them up and get them back in the fight. And so it's a different kind of relationship where they're just, trusted members of that tribe, and they walk with them. And on that model, that's what my aspiration has been based on. What I've seen, to answer your question, is that many times the first story you hear is not the story that you need to understand. It's the test of trust. Can you be trusted? Are you capable of walking through this valley with me and bringing me around the other side of the moon? And if you aren't, that's where it ends. And so really offering radical safety and letting people know and communicating intentionally, you can say anything you want to me, and I will not be surprised. I will not judge you. We'll just talk about all of it. And we are here to reckon directly with the fox in your gut. Now, that's a kind of a weird phrase, so I have to give you a little bit of a background. And you've read.
Yeah, tell us that story. You talk about that in your book. I really like that story.
So that comes from the boy of Sparta, the legend of the boy of Sparta, who was in a very stoic culture. They raised their children to be warriors, and this boy stole a fox and put the fox under his cloak, and the fox started to eat his stomach. And because they're stoic, he didn't say a word. And suddenly he drops over dead in plain view of everybody around him. And so I use the legend of the boy of Sparta to talk about the kinds of lethal secrets that can eat us alive if we don't find a way to reckon with them directly. So a lot of the work that I think healers need to do is, above all, build the trust, and then find out what it is that is eating somebody alive. If you can get to the root of that hidden pain, then it won't metastasize, and it won't become something that's a crisis or something that could threaten somebody's life down the line. So that's kind of an analogy I use to describe it.
Yeah, and I think that story and that metaphor is so vibrant and visceral throughout your book. But I would love to take a quick step back and just give our viewers an overview of what is your book about? Why did you write this book? Why were you called to share this story?
Yeah, thanks. Well, I think this is everything I wished I had known, 10, 12 years ago when I started working with warfighters. I came into a pretty hostile group of folks, understandably so, who saw me as the FNG. And I was replacing a provider they trusted. And so there was an attachment wound there that they wanted to keep working with him. And, it wasn't personal, but I had to sit with the discomfort of being misunderstood. I had people say, what are you, like 25? What do you know about being in combat or taking life or death? And it became very clear to me that there was this huge cultural and trust gap between warfighters and the healers that are assigned to bring them home from war and support their recovery. It also became clear that for somebody who has been, as Karl Marlantes, one of my friends and mentors, talks about the Temple of Mars, going into the space of combat where there is an element of the sacred and you have the power to take or preserve life. When you are working with somebody that's been in the Temple of Mars, rank has no right to be in that room.
So you talked about the FNG, which I believe is the effing new guy. And I know this from being an officer myself, going to Afghanistan. I literally went from having 3 months of training and then going to Afghanistan and being put in the seat with the gear that I was supposed to control like 150 aircraft with, and also lead a group of Marines. And they looked at me like, you're like 5'2" and a woman, and how old are you? You know, I was the effing new guy.
Yeah.
So I totally understand this concept of building trust and creating that partnership where you, like you say, can walk with your, you know, with those who are being healed. And I think that this is a particularly unique time right now to be talking about this
Yeah.
because of building trust, right? Because you also mentioned that these are not just veteran issues. A lot of us can identify with being the effing new guy. A lot of us can identify with having, you know, not developing that level of trust with our community or with our caregivers. So I'd love for you to share a little bit more about why you think that this topic in this book is particularly beneficial for us to talk about right now.
Well, I think it has it has such broad implications for the business world, for nonprofit work, for all kinds of global initiatives in terms of the source of our power and strength is our connection. And if your connection is not solid, there's nowhere you have to go with that. And it's not intuitive, you know, to think of ourselves as the FNG, right? I went to a lot of school and was taught repeatedly that I'm the doctor and I'm the expert in the room and I have all this, you know, knowledge to share. And so it's not intuitive. We walk into a room and there's a script that turns into a hidden class system in medicine, where you walk in that room and you say in all kinds of ways, both subtle and overt, from the degree on the wall to where you sit, to who directs the session, to what you feel you can ask somebody before you've built the trust, to whether you feel you have the right to say, how many firearms do you own and how are you storing them? You know, before you've built the trust, everything communicates something on a meta level. And so that's what I realized that we're doing without even realizing it. And I think it has such broad implication for CEOs and leaders that if you don't build the trust and understand accurately, oh, okay, I have a deficit of trust to overcome. I'm not even coming in neutral. And as an officer, you know, the good officers, you know, the warriors that are under their command, they would take a bullet for them. But the good ones, they take a step back and they come in humble and they listen and they learn and they observe and they build the trust that way rather than coming in and saying, well, I'm the expert here and this is what we're going to do.
There are some really big challenges that are facing our warriors right now during COVID-19 in particular.
Suicide rates in the military population may be up as much as 20% since the start of COVID. What's interesting about that is that, you know, I'm in contact with a lot of warriors all over the country, you know, various places, all 4 branches of service. There have been a number of crises and suicides, completed suicides, in the networks that I know and support. And I'm not a clinician anymore. These are just people that are reaching out to me with their hearts broken because one more irreplaceable person has been lost to their own hand. And so this has really been a problem since the start of the pandemic. And sometimes, you know, researchers will say, well, we don't have the research. But many times there's a big lag between the research coming out and what's actually going on. So, you know, you're trying to make decisions on intel that's a year and a half, 2 years old. It really is a problem right now. And yet there are some that are thriving. So people are going in 2 different extreme directions. We take the example of my friend Sidney Morris. I met him years ago at a Marine reunion hosted by a retired Master Sergeant, dear friend and now brother of mine, in a metaphorical way. And so we were at this reunion and Sydney was somebody that, like many, questioned me at first. I represented everything he didn't like on paper. And so we really had to build that trust with each other and earn it with each other. But we did. We did over several, occasions and times that we met and talked and saw each other's heart. And so when George Floyd was killed, that was a turning point for Sydney, where it really hit him hard. He's a 2-7 Marine. He is somebody who grew up in inner city LA, and he called me and he said, I need help. I need to get treatment. And so we got him taken care of. He got a stellate ganglion block, which is an injection in the neck that seems to reboot the adrenaline system. And it can be amazing. It gets people calm in their own bodies. And then when they follow that up with therapy and other work that they do, then they can maintain that feeling for a very long time. So Sydney is somebody where the kind of cumulative effects of the pandemic and then racial, trauma on top of that really had this impact on him that's totally understandable. On the other hand, some people have had the opposite experience, and it's really fascinating, where they will say, you know what, it's interesting. I feel a little bit less like a stranger in a strange land, a little bit less alien, because now Americans, for the first time, understand what it feels like to be in my skin. There's a threat they can't see. They have to be hyper vigilant all the time. They have to be bunkered in. They don't know who they can trust. They're worried about something blowing up, like somebody they love developing a health condition or COVID. There is a ton of sudden, unexpected cut-off grief. So even when people have lost loved ones to other causes, they're separated. They can't be with them when they pass, and that's a traumatic loss. And so Americans are feeling things that our warfighters have felt for many years. And if there's one, maybe good thing that can come of this, it would be a humbling of everybody in society around what is trauma, how does trauma truly impact us, and what does it really mean when our strongest and bravest citizens can die by suicide? What does that really mean? It certainly doesn't mean that they're weak. That's not the logical conclusion. So now we're all feeling these impacts and maybe having more of a personal experience of what trauma is and how much it really does affect everything in our life.
So you do talk about in your book that servicemen and women commit suicide for different reasons from the general population, and I found that to be really intriguing because it's specific to them, and a lot of it is very preventable.
Well, I do think there is a unique Achilles heel, not only among service members, but also then within certain groups within that tribe. So leaders have a special vulnerability, in my perspective. But just speaking about the group as a whole, and this doesn't explain every suicide, that would not be something that anybody should try to do, but I do think there's some unique vulnerabilities. And so what I talk about in Warrior is that we have to understand these 5 things to really understand the culture and the military ethos. The first thing is that warfighters, military service members, they're protectors. They're protectors of the people they love and the values they hold sacred. The second thing is that their response to threat is a matter of muscle memory. They are trained to take out the threat with decisive action when there's a threat in front of them. The third thing is that they view firearms as tools. Firearms are viewed and trained to be extensions of their identity, assets, and tools for the protection of those they love and the values they hold sacred. That's warriorship. The fourth one is that they suffer from these injuries that are more invisible and more lethal than the injuries that we have called the injuries of, the invisible injuries of war. More lethal sometimes than post-traumatic stress and TBI. So some of these injuries that we don't understand very well as a whole, as a field, moral injuries, survivor guilt, shame that metastasizes into like a sense of, I am the problem. I have turned into the monster. If my wife really knew who I was, she wouldn't let me anywhere near the kids. I should go on a deserted island because nobody should be around me. So when they start to get these thoughts and feelings, which are to me predictable, mental warfare is predictable. That's what I think I can really bring to the field of supporting warriors, is helping them understand the tactical analysis of mental warfare. So they have these injuries, and then when they see that they're the threat, they drop into a tactical threat elimination mode. They put themselves in the crosshairs and they move with purpose on taking themselves out. And so that, I think, is a unique vulnerability among those who fight our wars. And it doesn't have anything to do with their strength as people. It's actually quite the opposite. And so I think we don't understand these cultural and psychological factors and the warrior ethos. We don't understand how to prevent suicide in a very precision way.
So much of this resonates. I myself have felt like a burden on people, and I know that, like, we're action oriented as military and veterans. So it's like, if I'm causing pain to someone, what am I going to do about myself to help stop that? And so much of what you say really resonates with my own experience. And my partner and I, we're both Marines. We met in Afghanistan, so we get to see some of this in action and kind of heal our wounds together. But not everybody has that, the benefit of working with someone like you. And I would also offer, as you were speaking, it was coming up to me, like, somebody might be listening to this and think like, oh, that's totally not true. It's a generalization. This is kind of pigeonholing veterans. And I would say, like, to our viewers, if you're triggered by this, or if there's something in you that's like, whoa, I'm really resisting this, I would encourage you to read Doc Springer's book, because I feel like once we start to dig deeper, we realize that so much of what you have found through thousands of hours of working one-on-one with veterans and military is exactly true. And I think that this is a unique opportunity for us to reassess why we're seeing 20 veteran suicides a day, which is a huge problem.
Yeah, and here's the thing. I have never talked to a warrior that trusts me, that has developed and held that trust with me, who has not felt like a burden or had self-destructive thoughts at one time or another. That's the universal. How powerful would it be to be able to get into TCOM or get way upstream when we're training and building warfighters and saying, you know what, this is how it's going to come at you. These are the contours of mental warfare. These are the predictable lines of the enemy. You will feel, because you deal with life and death, you will have that question at some time or another. You will feel like a burden. And because of your warrior ethos, that can get perverted into a sense of, I'm the threat, I'm the problem, I'm the burden. And the best thing for me to do as a warrior is to take myself out. That can be the perversion and the fundamental lie that results in collateral damage for those that you love and the values you hold sacred. So then the solution becomes, how do you stack your warrior code, the people you love and the values you hold sacred, which is being a warrior, against that fundamental lie, that self-destructive lie that you're the threat that needs to go? Because if you talk to your family members, they would say, absolutely not. We need you here. There's nothing in us that wants you to take yourself out. We want you to get help. We want you to get treatment. We want you back. We want the old, we want you to return to us. We don't want you to take yourself out. So it would be so powerful just to get these really simple insights upstream. And they come from a place of partnership, of saying to warriors at these private reunions, here's a card, write down for me if you would. Don't put your name on it. Write down for me what the demons are screaming to you at the end of the tunnel of despair. And there's predictable themes. So I talk about the predictable themes. So it's not just volume of, working with so many warfighters, but it's also just really understanding the warrior ethos, I think, and how that can be turned on a person in a moment of vulnerability.
Oh yeah, so much of this comes from a place of goodness, right? It's like, I want to be a strong protector for my family, for my tribe, for my unit. And then, like you said, it gets shifted and kind of twisted. But what I find to be really beautiful about all of this is there is hope, as you mentioned, in warrior, that we can repurpose the warrior. And talk a little bit about, you had a great quote by General Mattis, which is, if we start telling our veterans enough that they are damaged goods, they may actually start believing it.
Yeah. And I think that he said that when he was presenting to MMCA, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right. Yeah,
He gave at Marines Memorial Hotel. And it's absolutely right. I think too many years, we focused on alarming statistics. And when I talk with warriors, they say that makes me feel demoralized, like I'm broken gear and there's no coming back from this. And, there absolutely is. I know all of these stories of warriors that are doing phenomenal work. They're wonderful agents of change and leaders in society, and they've been in that pit. They've come through that particular valley. And so I have a different perspective on this. But I think there's also, the possibility, if you understand what drives the pain, what drives the despair, you can reverse engineer that in a kind of psyops way and give people the understanding they need for, this is why you must turn to your tribe. If you say that you would die for these people and these values in battle, then live for them instead. And if you don't want to live for yourself right now, that's all right. But just do it anyway, because a warrior is somebody who does the hard thing in the service of what they value and what they hold sacred. So connect with your fire team anyway. Connect with your core unit anyway. And borrow their hope and borrow their strength for a while and be interdependent and confront this threat as a tribe. Don't take it on as a solitary, hero or a soldier of one. That's a mistake. And so squirreling away and trying to deal with it on your own doesn't work. And so there are very practical solutions that people can deploy to really face this kind of challenge.
And you talk, there's actually a quote in your book. Someone described you as a tender warrior. And I really liked that because that is kind of how I see myself these days. And I felt that my own evolution has gone from, like a wartime warrior, sort of a physical warrior, to a tender warrior. And I found that my own ability to heal comes from my deepest wounds. Those are the places where I can heal best. And I think that that's like, it's like a Rumi quote or something like that. So I'd love to know if you've seen that happen.
Yeah, I don't know if some of the warriors that I work with would describe me as tender. I think one of the things about me, to go back to what General Mattis said, is that I do take a very different approach, a kind of, listen, I know your strength. I know your strength. So I can help you understand how to overcome this challenge in your life. And therapy or treatment, it's your next crucible. So get up and fight, because you're going to be stronger than you ever were if we evolve you as a warrior. You can stay a warrior. I will honor and treat that warriorship with dignity in this process, but it requires us to do the hard thing and reckon with what we would rather not face. And so there's ways to kind of describe the challenge of therapy. And the thing about it is that when you position it correctly and you help warriors understand what their assets are, they do amazing things in therapy, because they're like people like, oh, that's the hill to take. Watch me. That's why I love working with this population, because once it sinks in, like what the predictable campaigns of the enemy are, when you're in that mental warfare space in that valley, they get pretty pissed off. And that's good. Anger is good. Like, yeah, something was trying to take you out. And so let's do this differently, or let's face off against this challenge and let's walk through this together. And I get to see all the amazing things that they do with their lives and the hope that they find. And it's just really, really fun.
And I think one of the most powerful things that you do throughout your book, and clearly throughout your whole career, is truly empathize with the Marines and service members that you've been serving, because I see you, you talk about it, about reading like the Marine Rifle Squad. I'm sure it's like
Yeah.
MCDP something. And for all my infantry folks out there, they probably know what it is. But you read that and you were like, okay, well, how do I put this in terms that Marines and military are going to understand? And I think that really helps people resonate a lot deeper than if I were getting a bunch of words that I don't understand thrown at me from a doctor.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you. I mean, that goes back to that invisible class system, right? That we talk about in
Mhm.
medicine. So the people in power set the language.
Mhm.
So if I'm expecting my patients to come to me with all the language I'm used to, that I was, taught to share from graduate school or whatever, that's not being a doc. And so, yeah, I went in there and said to some of the Marines and warriors of other branches, train me up, test me, teach me what I need to know to support you better. And they really took that on. And so they assigned me, read the Marine Rifle Squad manual, and you got to take this test that we took in boot camp. And, so there was a time when, I really knew all that stuff. I wouldn't want to pop quiz right now, but I did go through a process of really being steeped in that and trying to learn it, because absolutely critical to show respect to the people you support by putting these concepts in their language, within their culture, with their value alignment. And so in the book, I talk about the tactical analysis of mental warfare. This is the thing I would love to get into TCOM or
Mm.
other, infantry training schools, as we build warriors, if we can get it upstream in their language, to give them a sense of, here's how the enemy will come at you. Here are the weapons the enemy uses. Here's how they fight in battle. And an isolated Marine can be easily ambushed. All of this language that's already in the Marine Rifle Squad manual and other infantry manuals, counterinsurgency field manuals, another great source of insight, can be reframed and repurposed to help people understand mental warfare.
Mm. And so in your ideal world, what would our viewers be able to help you with? What is your ideal for re-envisioning this myth and getting greater, more empathetic support to our service members?
Well, I know I'm swimming upstream, but I've got so many good Marines and warriors of all branches behind me. I can't stop. And so I've sometimes had a little bit of a struggle with the self-promotional aspect of writing a book or doing anything, really to put yourself out there. And I had he was a Marine that's a dear friend of mine, tell me to envision a bridge in my mind. And then when I had that bridge envisioned, to get the F over it, um, because this project is not about me. It's about what the warriors I have served have invested in me in terms of trust, and what they've shared with me, and our ability to together really figure out some things. And so I guess I would ask that people get the word out about this book, the audio book. I want opportunities to train this and speak about this, because I think there's a long way to go. I mean, we've got to swim upstream against a tide of messaging that says that warriors are broken gear, and that people that serve us come back damaged and they'll never be the same. And post-traumatic stress is a life sentence. All of that, I'm just going to call BS on all of that, based on so many experiences walking with warriors through that time of challenge and seeing them grow and become stronger than they've ever been. So if we can hit a tipping point in awareness, that's going to be critical. And I need all the help I can get to kind of shift that fundamental paradigm that tells warriors they're broken. It's just not true.
Yeah, it is such a powerful process of going through the evolution of feeling broken, or coming from a place of, maybe even being told you're broken, to doing that healing work and realizing that, like me personally, I am stronger today than ever before,
Yeah.
because at one point I felt broken. And I think that can be so true for all of my brothers and sisters in arms. And what I'm hearing you say is, if we could get training for this into TCOM, or even language into some of our manuals, so that our Marines and other military service people, it's ingrained in the culture, and also that trust starts to build for our mental health providers. I think that's really important. I'm hearing that, like, buy the book, everybody. Like, buy this book, buy it for your friends, buy it for your colleagues, even folks who are not military members. You mentioned before the Stella Center. So I'd love to just hear a minute about that and what people could do to support it.
Yeah, I think the best way to treat people with trauma is to fuse biological and psychological, as well as mind-body practices. I think if we understand that the treatment of those who suffer from trauma, it's truly one mission, and we get aligned, and we don't, again, back to the class system, we don't come to feel that we own our patients. A healer sets the conditions for healing. And if somebody else offers something you don't, that your patient needs, then you refer them for that. And you work and you meaningfully collaborate with the providers that do that. So I got involved with this treatment that addresses the biological injury associated with trauma exposure. When our system is locked into a state of fight or flight and we can't throttle down, that becomes a biological injury. And so what it is an injection in the neck of a local anesthetic, commonly used FDA-approved local anesthetic, that seems to reboot the adrenaline system and really bring people back to a state of calm. And then what happens is when they're calm in their own bodies, then you have this window of opportunity as a psychologist or another healer to get in there and really change the thinking and behavior and relationship patterns that maintain the trauma response. So the two together, I've treated about 50 warriors over the past couple of years with Dr. Lipoff, who pioneered the use of this anesthesiology pain procedure for the treatment of trauma. And we've had amazing outcomes.
This is powerful work. And I am just so thrilled that we were able to have this conversation today. Your dedication to our service members and veterans is clear in the passion that you show for in writing this book and writing your previous book, Beyond the Military. And I think that there is just so much more to be done. And I'm really excited for our viewers to watch this later and to hopefully get a little more details when they read your work as well.
Thank you for having me. You know, there's a phrase that says there's no better friend, no worse enemy than a U.S. Marine. And I serve all warriors of all branches, but Marines have been no better friends to me than anybody in my life. And they've been hugely instrumental. And it's so meaningful to be here with you talking about this work and what I envision for this in terms of how we build and equip Marines to face their mental warfare. To be doing this for MMCA is incredible. And I'm so grateful for hosting, for having you, interview me for this piece. Thank you, Susan.
Well, the Marines Memorial, we thank the Marines Memorial as well for continuing conversations like this. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this presentation from Marines Memorial Association and Foundation. To learn more about the organization, visit marinesmemorial.org. To make a donation to support programs that honor the legacy of military service, visit ourmission.marinesmemorial.org.